Welcome to Blockchain 2025. We explore how blockchain technology will affect major industries in the future.
Each episode dissects one industry, how it currently works, why blockchain can disrupt it, and some blockchain projects trying to be the solution.
Blockchain 2025 is part of the Bitcoin.com podcast network. Learn about Bitcoin, create a wallet, and buy your first Satoshis all at Bitcoin.com.
Welcome to Blockchain 2025, episode number 3 of season 1. My name is Matt Aaron.
And I'm Nick Cutanero.
Nick, before we start the show, I would like to call out an iTunes review from Julio Medina. The subject of his review was, loved it, looking forward to more, exclamation point. And he said, this was great. Thanks for putting this together. Looking forward to hear more from this show. You have a subscriber out of me without a doubt. Okay, awesome. Well, Julio, thanks so much for listening. We are just getting started here. And anyone else that's listening, if you like the show, please leave us a review on iTunes. It will help more people get a chance to listen.
Definitely.
Yeah, well, a couple things here. One is, my favorite line is, I always look good on audio. And two, listeners, so you know, we do record on a video call, and Nick does need a haircut. And I'm actually under a blanket because I don't have carpet in the room I'm recording in. So that's why we do a podcast and not a video show on YouTube.
Definitely. And Matt, I got to say, I'm really enjoying doing this podcast with you. This has been a lot of fun. And the beauty of podcasts, well, I don't have to dress up. You don't know if I need a haircut or not. You don't know if I'm surrounded by half-empty Gatorade bottles and protein bar wrappers. Actually, just kidding. I keep a very neat and tidy office, but who knew? This is a lot of fun.
well, good. Yeah. I know the feeling. I think a lot of us internet entrepreneurs, we tend to work in our pajamas more than we'd like to admit. And sometimes you're kind of caved in your home office for long periods of time.
Yeah, definitely. Because I don't like to shave more than I have to unless I'm going out in public.
But yeah, let's move on to today's show. So Nick, what industry are we going to cover today?
Today we'll be discussing the art industry.
Okay, so art is a really big industry. I'd like you to distinguish, what type of art are we going to cover?
Today we'll be covering physical art, think fine art, paintings, sculptures, not the rare digital art as a lot of people in the cryptocurrency space are familiar with, not the rare Pepes. We'll be talking about, I don't want to say real art. Art is art. Art is creativity, but more traditional art, items you'd see in private collections, galleries, or museums.
Gotcha. And we can't cover everything because the blockchain is going to have a huge influence on art. And when you create transparency and cut out middlemen, it can help all types of artists. But I believe this episode, we're going to focus more on the fine art. So paintings of considerable value. Is that correct?
Correct. And before we begin, I'd like to suggest that everyone who's interested in this topic watch a documentary on Netflix. It's called Blurred Lines Inside the Art World. I watched it recently in January, and it was awesome. I learned so much about the industry, and it gives a lot of insight as to the current practices, which may not be fair, and some things that artists are challenged with.
Okay, well, as a quick highlight of that documentary, what are some current things today that you would say could be considered unfair practices?
Well, pricing, like anything else. I know we've talked about this topic in previous episodes with decentralized marketplaces and fees and things like that, but the playing field not being level as far as pricing, more specifically for inexperienced buyers of art, is really one of the biggest challenges. Not to mention galleries and dealers being able to take advantage potentially of artists and end up profiting the most.
Okay, and how do galleries and dealers take advantage of the artists?
Well, it goes back to making a market. So artists, and I'm not an artist, so it's difficult for me to speak for artists. From what I understand, they want to just create art. Like that's their passion. That's what they want to do. The business side of it, marketing their art, selling their art, it's not what they do 24/7. It's not usually their forte. So a dealer, a gallery, that's their business. They're in the business of making markets, selling art, and representing artists.
Gotcha. And they can be what I'd say like naive, not focused on the business side. They're not as interested on the business side as the artistic side. So these dealers understand that and they profit from this.
Profiting is okay. There's a need for different elements of an ecosystem: buyers, sellers, dealers, wholesalers, for lack of a better term, museums. It all comprises the art ecosystem, but it's safe to say that removing the middleman is one of the biggest focuses of decentralization, leveling the playing field. If you can achieve more with less, with greater transparency, why not? Unless you're the guy getting screwed.
So yeah, well, Nick, let's dive into the whole art industry now. And starting out, tell us about your foray into the art industry and what is it currently like? Give us a lay of the land.
For sure. I'm no art expert, but I recently became aware of the industry, I'd say Q4 of 2017. And oddly enough, I became interested in art through cryptocurrency and finding artists who were accepting Bitcoin. So an artist, he goes as Chris Florentino. He paints. I've been following him on Instagram for a while. And when I noticed that he's accepting Bitcoin in exchange for his pieces, I started looking more into the art world. And I became a member of a pretty awesome group on Facebook called the Art Watch. And there's a lot of internet marketers in that group as well. It's a small group, but the artists are in there. There's a lot of really good threads showing new artists. And for people who are actually looking to buy or sell artwork, it's a small community for that. So you can go direct.
Gotcha. But is this a members only group? Can anyone join?
Anyone can join.
Cool. So you got into this very recently then, the end of 2017. So here's a question for you, Nick. Mm-hmm. What do you think draws a lot of artists? Because I've seen this at the conferences. There's a show actually on Humans of Bitcoin about this with a crypto artist. What draws artists to Bitcoin?
Artists realize their art is tradable. It's speculative in nature. They're looking at the art buyer the same way a cryptocurrency buyer looks at cryptocurrency. Essentially, you're buying art for a variety of reasons. Art is energy. It's creativity. There are some people who love art for art's sake. There are some people that realize it has value. And there's a lot of other benefits art brings to collectors and artists as well. It connects people. It's so cool knowing other people that own work by the same artist and being able to network with those people. It's just a really cool community.
I like the community aspect, and I also love the energy aspect, because a lot of times cryptocurrencies, you see them exploding, not just in price, but in the community, you do feel this digital energy, right? And so I guess the same idea applies to art. And a lot of times, we get a lot of flack in the media. We'll say the no-coiners or the people that are against Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and they say, how do you value this? But an industry that's been around for a long time is, how do you value art? That is not an easy thing to do.
You're absolutely right. When valuing art, there's a multitude of factors. Like I said before, I'm new to this, but like any other industry, the value is what someone is willing to pay for something. It all depends on what people are willing to pay. The more limited, the more rare the art, the more notoriety the artist has, the more powerful people they connect with. So when an artist is in different circles working with celebrities, and those celebrities, especially on Instagram, are showcasing that artist's work, showing what they're doing, how they're doing it, it drives value up. It's the cool kids club.
Yeah. And I've heard of situations where, let's just say someone owns 9 pieces or, a lot of pieces of one artist, and they hear about an auction for that artist. They'll go to that auction and purposely bid up that painting to a very high price to make sure that that artist becomes hot, and then all of the paintings they own currently will increase in value.
Exactly. That happens all the time. So they'll run the bids up. Let's just say they're the bag holder. They're the highest bidder. Well, they'll just buy it because that maintains the value of the portfolio. So art as an investment is pretty damn cool, I think. for a lot of reasons. And then there are some reasons which may not be so cool if you're on the opposite end of a trade. So blockchain keeps the playing field level in a lot of respects. There's greater transparency, and there's a lot more that you can do on the investment side with art using cryptocurrency, using blockchain technology that make this really exciting and a fitting topic for our show, Blockchain 2025.
For sure. And so before we go into the blockchain, I like the comparison you made before we started recording, Nick, in that looking at artists is almost like looking at cryptocurrencies. You know, they can get some PR, they get buzz, there's a party, which is the equivalent in blockchain, you know, in cryptos to a press release or some news coming out of China. And in the price action can be affected by this. So there's a lot of parallels between art and crypto that honestly, until we even started recording, I didn't even think about.
Definitely. And artists, just so people are aware, they're into crypto. I know some pretty cool artists that are into cryptocurrency. I mentioned Floor before, Chris Florentino. There's an artist called This Is Addictive, Daniel Allen Cohen, Rob Sakadas. I own some pieces by him. And those pieces are cryptocurrency inspired. So that's really what I like to have in my collection right now. And there's another artist, Giovanni Morales, I actually met in Las Vegas at a cryptocurrency meetup. So there are many cool artists, modern artists, that are playing the same markets we are.
Amazing. And Nick, I know that you purchased a This Is Addictive piece using Litecoin. You're going to have to give us a photo of that piece for the website.
Absolutely. And for the record, for that particular artist, This Is Addictive, I was his first transaction that utilized cryptocurrency, more specifically Litecoin.
Wow. Cool, man. Yeah, I can't wait to see a photo of that, and I'm sure listeners will as well. This can all be found at Bitcoin.com/podcast, and we have a variety of shows, but just click on Blockchain 2025 for all the show notes and links to things we talk about in the show. So, Nick, what else do you love about the art industry?
I love the art industry because anyone can have a connection to the artist. So, for me, that's been so cool, being able to speak with artists through DMs on Instagram, get to know them, they get to know me, I get to know some of the other people they've sold art to. So the community aspect is pretty awesome.
For sure. And I was in the white paper of Maecenas, which is a crypto startup that's addressing art that we're going to talk about. And I think other websites, I've seen that, fine art has outperformed the S&P 500 over the last X amount of years. I don't know if it's 2 or 3 decades, but that's a pretty amazing stat to me that fine art, I only thought of it from an artistic sense, but as an investment is a very viable investment for people to make.
Absolutely. I think people should be evaluating art the same way they've maybe evaluated cryptocurrency over the past year. So as an internet marketer, I love art because it gives me a chance to blow that artist up on my own. I can do it on Instagram, I can do it on Facebook, I can go in forums. Hey, I can talk about art on a podcast. The same way, if I'm bullish on a particular cryptocurrency, there's nothing stopping me from promoting it. And I think that's one of the coolest things about art that people often forget. There are a lot of parallels to the rise of certain altcoins. It's very much like an artist, and there are communities behind certain altcoins, and people live, breathe, eat, sleep the mission of the altcoin. And there are a lot of collectors and enthusiasts of art that may feel the same way about artists.
And Nick, I want to set the art market right now. There is an estimated $3 trillion worth of fine art in storage, and only $65 billion is traded annually through auction houses and art dealers. So 3 trillion, gold's what, like 7 trillion? That's almost 50% of the value of all the gold in the world. That is gigantic.
Without a doubt. That's a liquidity issue right there. That's not good for people who are looking to trade in, trade out of positions. But on the flip side, that's an interesting statistic. I'm really glad that you brought it up because it shows characteristics of a mature market where people are holding because they believe in the value of the art, or there may be other reasons that they may be holding. Art is a very interesting investment vehicle. So assuming all goes well with the trajectory of my life, I'll be worth a crap ton of money. And it'll be more efficient for me to pass on artwork in the physical form to the next generation rather than a cash-based estate.
Is that because of taxes, inflation, both?
Yeah, consult with an accountant or an attorney on that. I'll probably give the wrong advice. But yeah.
Yeah, well, disclaimer,
Yeah.
but something to
Yeah.
something to research. And so yeah, for those that are not so into numbers, right? 65 billion out of 3 trillion. What's that? Like a 2% of art is actually volume and sales a year of the total market. That's very, very low. And so, Nick, so we mentioned the part of illiquidity. There's not that much artwork out there, and people are not aware of what is for sale, and the logistics are difficult, et cetera, et cetera. Give us some other downsides to the current art industry.
So current downsides to the art industry, typically dealers and galleries, if they're involved in a transaction, they'll run the bids up. They're looking for the biggest spread that they can generate. And if they own some of that artist's work, it's actually in their best interest. So you just don't know everything that's happening below the surface of that iceberg.
Gotcha. Okay. And we're going to touch on the same points, but it's important, lack of transparency. What else? I mean, what about expenses?
Well, art in of itself can be very, very expensive. So let's take a look at another area that people enjoy art, museums. So the overhead to run a museum is through the roof, right? Ticket prices alone, granting you admission, oftentimes, if not always, don't cover all operational expenses. So you're going to get private donors to make sure that the legacy of art continues. But it can be very difficult for a museum to acquire art when we just mentioned before that it's outperforming the S&P 500, it's outperforming other more traditional investments, making it more expensive and challenging to acquire.
So, yeah. So on one hand, it's more challenging to acquire, but if a museum or gallery makes good investments, theoretically, they should also increase their amount of assets, even if they're fairly illiquid at the moment.
Definitely. Now, that's great, but the downside, Matt, would be that in order to bring new people in to appreciate art, they may have to sell some of those awesome pieces that they've gone to the end of the earth to acquire in order to finance the acquisition of new pieces.
Okay, that's really interesting you mentioned that, Nick, because I think it's the perfect moment to bring in Maecenas. And I'm going to spell that for you. It's Maecenas. They are a blockchain startup trying to tackle a lot of the inefficiencies in the fine art industry. And one thing that we mentioned is that a museum may have to sell paintings to bring in more. So it's kind of almost like a zero-sum game. You sell one painting, then you buy more, but then you don't have the same art you had before. But with Maecenas, you can keep the painting physically and then put a less than 50%, we'll say 49%, tokenize it and let people invest in this painting so they can own shares of this painting or coins which will hold a share of this painting, and they can use that money to buy more art.
It's an absolutely brilliant model. I love it. I see the future going down this path. It just makes sense. Tokenizing, creating fractional ownership of a piece of expensive art gives the feeling of ownership to a variety of different people, frees up cash, which would allow a museum to buy additional pieces of art, and in my opinion, only makes the investment better because you have more people vested in it, and all of those great qualities that I described earlier about why I like art, I have the ability to promote it, I can get people excited about it. Well, if you pool that to 50 different investors through tokenization, well, that's theoretically 50 times the marketing power.
It's a great point. So there's a couple of things here we should highlight. One is the tokenization. Everyone, in case you don't get the whole token part, these are crypto tokens, right? These are shares. So you're able to buy and sell shares. So what do I like? I love the democratization in the sense that I may know art very well, but I may not have the cash flow to buy, $3 million paintings. But if I could perhaps identify a painting that's undervalued on the blockchain, I could buy, $500 worth of that painting. And if I'm right about the artist, or a year from now, it might be worth that $500, but it might be worth $1,500 or more. So it allows people that love fine art from an investment standpoint to get involved. And I think also as an art fan, there might be a very, very expensive piece out there. Maybe it's $50 million. And even saying you own $100 worth of your favorite painting, I think there's some great sentimental value there as well.
That's a great story. It's an awesome narrative. I love it for so many reasons because you can hedge risk instead of going all in on one particular artist or one particular piece. Let's just say we're using round numbers. Let's say $1 million. Instead of deploying $1 million on a single piece of art, break it up into 10 investments, $100K a pop. It's an interesting way of investing in art without having to hold it and spreading your risk across the street, which is something favorable I think most investors are looking for.
That's a great point, Nick. So it's almost like the same as in crypto. You could buy 10 different cryptos, obviously, because you can buy fractions of a Bitcoin. But what if you could only buy one Bitcoin if you had to buy a whole Bitcoin, which obviously isn't true, but that's kind of how art is today. Then you have a lot of diversification risk. That's another advantage. What else? I think that, and we talk about this in most of our episodes, because blockchain is fantastic for getting rid of fees. I know that Sotheby's and a lot of the art brokers and dealers, they take 10 to 15% commissions. But with Maecenas, the commissions could be reduced dramatically, and that would take away money from the middlemen and more money to the buyers and sellers directly of the art.
Absolutely, and artists can participate as well. All of the art that I've purchased, I've worked directly with the artist. I'm not saying that the artists that I'm buying art from are, the best or the worst. It is what it is. Like, they communicate on Instagram. They're younger. They're promoting themselves. But there may be certain artists that don't want to engage in selling art directly to buyers. So there is reliance on a gallery or dealer or auction, rather, to move the work around.
Right on. So we see clear advantages for galleries and museums to raise money. We see clear advantages for fans and for investors, right? So another cool note I think that you mentioned, Nick, is comparing art to real estate. So listeners are going to say, why is that? I mean, we just compared art to crypto, which I didn't see too many comparisons going into it, but what is it about the real estate market that's very similar to art?
All right, so let's make a parallel. Let's look at art and real estate. When it comes to art right now, you buy the whole piece. You put it up on a wall, you put it in storage, but you own it. With real estate, you can buy a piece of real estate in cash, you can get some leverage, you can go to a bank and finance it, you can bring outside investors in and create a syndication scenario. There's many, many, many ways to get a real estate deal done with creative financing. For art, there probably is to a certain degree, but utilizing smart contracts, utilizing cryptocurrency, utilizing a potentially decentralized ecosystem for obtaining fractional shares of pieces of art where the exit is, whatever the exit is, likely at a higher value than the purchase price, or potentially you can trade those shares in the art with somebody else through tokenization, and those tokens can be traded on an exchange or from buyer to buyer. Simply put, there's more things you can do with art from an appreciation perspective to have economic interest in awesome art, and it's a speculator's dream.
Yeah. So I think adding liquidity to the market, okay, for someone that's not into investing in finance, Nick, what are the clear benefits for all parties involved of adding liquidity to the market?
Well, simply put, you can buy and sell fractional pieces of art easier. And that's provided, Matt, that there is a market for it. Today, not so much. In 2023, definitely.
So yeah, I'm glad we covered art. First brought this topic up, I was a little bit unsure of how it would work, but discovering how big the industry is and all of the challenges that the industry faces right now and the opacity. My gosh, it's just hard to know, where the art is and listings, everything's fragmented. And I think it can do so much for all of the players in the space. Yeah, and it can make more art available for people to purchase, whether whole pieces or shares or coins of a painting. But Nick, so in conclusion, what's your take on Maecenas and blockchain and art going forward?
Well, what's important to understand as we relate this to cryptocurrency and blockchain, as a lot of our listeners are into, is that money moves around the crypto ecosystem better than traditional banks. So with art, you have international buyers, international sellers. You're dealing with bank wires, which could potentially be in large sums, millions of dollars.
Sure.
That's inefficient, expensive, raises red flags. Using cryptocurrency, yeah, and slow. Like, it's like saying I mailed the check out. Like, did you get it? Like, there's a lot of issues when moving large amounts of money around from private bank or account to, I say this, offshore accounts. Like, they do exist. People use them, But yeah, it could raise a lot of red flags. Using cryptocurrency is just more efficient, moves faster, it's cheaper, everything's on the blockchain. Transactions are verifiable. There's so many great things about the utilization of crypto in the sense of moving money around. I also think there's less volatility today in art in comparison to just a pure crypto play. So for all of our crypto traders, long-term hodlers, having some art in your crypto portfolio could be a great hedge for building a strong portfolio to weather the storms of the long term.
That's very interesting. So why do you believe there's less volatility in art than crypto?
Well, just look at the numbers. It's outperforming other markets. It's outperforming S&P 500. It may be outperforming certain real estate markets.
And it's been doing it for a much longer time, right? Whereas crypto is just so new.
And you can make the market. If you're a hell of a salesman, you could sell that art for double what you pay, maybe more. Forget about, comparing multiples. You could sell it if you make a strong case for whatever you want. And that's cool.
Right on. Well, amazing. Yeah, in conclusion, I'm very bullish on art in general and in the way blockchain can level the playing field, create more transparency, lower fees, and democratize the space, because fine art is traditionally for the jet set community, but that's not really fair comparing there's fans of art, and you shouldn't have to have a lot of money to be able to take part in the industry and have a greater role. So fantastic. Well, Nick, this was an awesome show. And so Nick, just in conclusion here, are you bullish on Maecenas and the blockchain art space?
Absolutely. I'm a bull, without a doubt. In the short term, the business model, as well as the token, I believe is still in the oven. I don't own any of the token, but over the long haul, definitely. This is a great play, without a doubt. Now, the reason why I'm saying for the short term, not so much, Maecenas, it's currently only featured on 2 exchanges, HitBTC and IDX. The volume on the daily is just a little low for me to get involved in right now, but for other people who are looking at risk differently, this may be like green light, go for you. These may be the tokens that you may be looking for. So right now, for me personally, I'm not there, but long term, without a doubt, I think the concept makes perfect sense, and this is a blockchain play, without a doubt.
Yeah, and they also really hit it with their ticker, which is just ART, A-R-T, if you go to CoinMarketCap. So kudos to them. I mean, so simple and so good.
Definitely. Just for that. Love the ticker. On the other side of the coin, as an internet marketer and the owner of a brand and reputation management company, the branding's a little tough. Maecenas, hard to spell, hard to say, but heck, there's a lot of artists out there. I'm probably mispronouncing their names as well, so it could be very fitting for the industry they're in, their brand name.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm very excited about Maecenas and can't wait to see how it all plays out going forward. And Nick, so next week, what industry are we going to cover?
Next week, we'll be talking about decentralized publishing.
Oh, wow. So that can be anywhere from like a decentralized Reddit to a decentralized YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. I'm excited to dig into that. All right, listeners. Well, thanks so much for listening to Blockchain 2025. Subscribe, share, leave reviews on iTunes, all that good stuff. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Bitcoin.com podcast network. To learn more about our shows, visit Bitcoin.com/podcast. Bitcoin.com podcast network.